This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is my very great pleasure to welcome Mr. Scott Brandley from Shopper Approved to the podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
It's awesome to have you along for the ride today, and you're dialing in from the great state of Utah, right?
Yep, just north of Salt Lake City in Ogden, if anyone knows where that is.
It's a beautiful outdoors area. I haven't been to Utah yet, but I do love my outdoor sort of climbing and tramping and rock climbing and stuff, and I hear Utah's got some of the best in the world.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We're right here there's mountains right behind me. It's gorgeous. Lots of skiing, hiking, rock climbing, all that kind of fun stuff.
I love it. I love it. I'm now based in Puebla City, which is about 2 hours southeast of Mexico City, and we sit at about 2,000 meters of elevation here in Puebla. So we don't get we get very temperate climate here. We don't get the heat and the humidity that the coastal areas do, especially during the summertime. It's very temperate year round. It sits between sort of 15 and 35 C year round here, which is very livable. It's a climate very similar to San Diego, basically here in Puebla.
Okay. Lucky.
Absolutely love living here. You have to come and pay us a visit the next time you're in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure.
Listen, before we get into Shopper Approved and what it is and what it does and how you guys came to be, tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be in this wonderful world of e-commerce and digital.
Wow, that's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. So I got onto the web back in 1997. And
been around a long time, like me.
Yeah. I thought I invented web-based email. That's basically my first story. I actually went on a church mission to South Africa in 1995, and it took a month for me to write a letter to my family and to get a response back. And at the end of that mission, they had just opened the very first internet cafe in Cape Town in South Africa. And so my dad wrote me a letter and he told me how to send an email. And it was a lengthy process, and I did it. And then the next day I went back to the internet cafe and I got a response. I'm like, this is amazing. And so when I got home back to Utah, I went to talk to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I got this brilliant idea. What if we created a web browser and people could log in and they could check their email from anywhere? So we hired a programmer from Weber State University, which is here in Ogden, and he spent a year developing what we thought was the first webmail program in the world. And right as we were about to launch it, we discovered Hotmail. And we were like, oh, man. So anyway, that was my first
You
check.
thought,
But
man,
that got me hooked.
you thought I'm going to be rich.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we called it M-Mail, which was close to Gmail. It's a couple letters off. But from there, I got that itch. And so we just kept getting into more and more software. And then in 2006, we launched a company called TrustGuard. And that does website security. So we essentially go in and pretend like we're a hacker, but we're ethical. And then we show people where their security problems are so they can fix them. And then we give them a little security badge so that people feel comfortable buying from them. And so that company's still around. We've helped thousands of websites and millions of consumers to have a safe shopping experience. And then in 2008, this is where it gets really fun. One day I went to Amazon and I saw all the ratings and reviews and things they were doing there. And I had this light bulb moment. I'm like, why isn't anybody doing this for other websites? And so that night I stayed up and I wrote a bunch of notes about this rating idea that I had. And I was so excited. I went into the office the next day. I got everybody together in a meeting. I'm like, guys, this is the next big thing. Everybody looked at me like I was insane. And they totally shot it down. They thought it was the worst idea ever. And so I actually tabled it for a year, and it got to the point between me, my dad was my business partner at the time. And so it was like two chiefs, and we were just battling it out every day. And it started to get heated, and we started to have fights in front of our staff and stuff. And I love my dad. And so we had what I call the car moment. We met in my car, and I basically said, Dad, look, I love you too much to keep fighting. We have different ideas of the future of the company. I need my own project. And so he basically told me, okay, I'll let you build your rating thing, but I get to control everything else. And so that day I walked away from everything. We were still partners, but he got to control it, TrustGuard and all of our other projects. And I got to start what became Shopper Approved. And so we launched Shopper Approved in 2010. And it was me and two other guys, a programmer and a project manager. And then we just built it, just blood, sweat, and tears, bootstrapped the crap out of it. We just and then in 2016 and 2017 we made the Inc. 500, and it's just been going since then. Now it's been, so that was in 2010. Now it's 2000, almost 2025. So it's been almost 15 years since we've been doing Shopper Approved. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah. And obviously this industry, the reviews, the testimonials, the sort of trust industry around e-commerce has exploded, particularly in the last decade. There's, I think if you go on to the Shopify app store and you search for reviews, there's about 30 different reviews platforms now out there that are pretty common, pretty mainstream. Some of them tie into loyalty platforms. Some of them tie into other experiences on the front end. Some of them tie into integrating those trust proof points into other third-party platforms like marketplaces, etc. So this industry has certainly become more important over the last decade than less important. And so trust, although I would say that the baseline level of trust in e-commerce in general has increased, because I've been doing this for 24 years. And certainly when I first started out in e-commerce, almost nobody trusted buying online. They thought, oh, geez, if I put in my credit card online, it's for sure going to get stolen. I'm for sure going to get ripped off. And in fact, if I place this order online, I got a 50-50 chance of actually even getting the item in the first place, because I don't know whether this business is even legitimate or if they're even in my country. And so I think that the trust in online shopping, the baseline level has increased. But I think so have the vectors of lies, deceit, challenges, phishing, all sorts of other things. I think that the opportunities to get scammed, the opportunities to have your data stolen, the opportunity for bad things to happen has also increased. So I think that never before in the history of the internet has trust been more important. And so I guess for you guys, you have continued to capitalize on the need for trust, particularly for e-commerce merchants to be able to build trust, have third-party verification of that, justifying that trust, and being able to make sure that both merchants and customers alike create an environment of trust that ultimately leads to higher conversions. At the end of the day, if I have a brand and I'm selling online and people can't trust me because I look like I've got a crappy website, or people don't know where I'm located, or there's no proof marks of any variety on the website, all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to get traction as a brand online, especially if you've got a D2C website. So you have obviously capitalized on that trust challenge, and you built a business around it.
Yeah, we often say trust is king. People say content is king, but that's not. We believe that trust is actually the most important thing behind a website. Because if your customer doesn't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. And then what do you have, right? I mean, so.
And when you first started the business, there were already platforms like Trustpilot and some other platforms that aimed to do something similar to what you do. When you looked out there and you scoured the market and said, hey, look, there's people maybe doing something similar out there, but they're not doing it the way I want it done. And they're not, we think there's a gap in the market. So when you first started out, How did you decide, hey, look, we think there's enough of a blue ocean here that nobody's doing things exactly the way we want to do them? How did you make that decision?
Yeah, so honestly, back in 2010, it was like the Wild West, right? And there were only a handful of rating and review platforms. There were a few that were in Europe that were really taking off. Pilot was one of them. But there wasn't anyone that really had a foothold in the United States. And so that gave us, and that was the opportunity that I saw. I'm like, nobody else is doing that here in the US. Trustpilot didn't really come into play in the US until about 10 years ago, maybe less than that. And there were a couple, there was Reseller Ratings was here, and BizRate. There was a company called BizRate. They went out of business. And no, I think they're still around, but they're not, yeah, they just died out. There was a couple. There was like one or two other ones, but they're gone now. But yeah, there was just like, it was just like a clean slate. It was blue ocean here in the United States. And we saw what they were doing. One of the opportunities that I saw was that Reseller Ratings, they were one of the only ones here, but they had a partnership with Google. And that partnership allowed them to get their reviews into Google. And they were the only one that had that for a while. And so early on in the process, once we got Shopper Approved launched, I wanted that. I knew I had to have that partnership in order to be successful. And you know how hard it is to get a hold of somebody at Google, especially back in the early 2010, 2015, right?
They were a monolith, and you just, unless you rocked up at their doorstep, it was almost impossible to get a hold of anyone at Google.
So I spent a year just scouring the internet, trying to find any way that I could to contact anyone at Google. And finally, I got a hold of somebody. And we started talking. They put me in touch with the right person, and I got that same partnership that Reseller Ratings had. And that's really that was the key that took us to where we are today. If I wouldn't have got that partnership, I don't know if Shopper Approved would be where we are. But I just kept going, man. Every day I would try to get hold of somebody, get knocked down, or not. Nobody would get a hold of me back. But I just had to keep going, and finally I got that person.
And you when you first started out, because you got 7 sort of different modules or things that you do and provide as a platform now, when you first started out, was it just product reviews and you didn't do store ratings, you didn't do video reviews, reputation management, Q&A, all that stuff? Was that added laterally? What did you launch with in terms of core functionality?
Yeah, so we actually launched Seller Ratings, which are now called Store Ratings. Google changed the name again, but which are basically the company reviews, right? It's based reviews about a customer's experience with the brand. And then later on, a few years later, we added product reviews. And then we added what we call reputation management, where you can actually send a portion of your reviews to other open review platforms to leave a review. And the thing that's cool about that is that a lot of open review platforms like Trustpilot it's a love-hate relationship, because on the positive side, anyone can go and leave a review about any company. But on the negative side,
Anybody can leave a review about any company.
right, yeah. And so the brand struggles because sometimes people that aren't even their client can go leave a review,
A
or they can be
competitor, whatever.
yeah, they can be targeted by a competitor. If they do something that somebody doesn't like socially, they can, like a group can get together and they can go bash them and leave bad reviews. So it's like a yin and a yang to open review platforms. And so this product that we have allows you to ethically send a percentage of people that have bought from you actually made a purchase, and we just say, hey, go leave a review over there. So there's no incentives. They don't even know. The customer doesn't even know until we send them there. And so what that allows the brand to do is to ethically send their customers to go leave reviews on different platforms. And over a large sample size, it normalizes their true reputation, because those customers can say anything they want. They can leave a good review or a bad review, and they're just going to be honest because they're just going to say what happened. And so now we've put the power back into the brand, where they can actually ethically manage their reputation online.
And how do you think of yourself in the context of not necessarily Trustpilot, which is more of an open review type platform, but how do you think of yourselves in the context of some of the other reviews, ratings, testimonials platforms out there? How do you think you guys continue to differentiate yourselves in an increasingly crowded market? Because it is becoming more crowded, and it feels like a new reviews platform launches every year, and it seems every single loyalty and membership platform has a reviews function in it or a capability in it now. And they're heavily incentivizing people through those platforms to leave reviews of products, of the brand, etc. So how do you think of yourselves in that pantheon of a crazy marketplace where it feels like everybody's tried to seize on this idea of trust in some way and leverage it in some way to get more feedback from customers, to create that closed loop outside of a pure, say, NPS play or something like that? Brands are always trying to get more feedback from their customers. And so they're trying to figure out ways, how can we do this? How can we insert this into the customer journey in such a way that we are creating that closed loop with customers, and we are getting valuable feedback, we are getting valuable product information and answering questions on behalf of people that have actually used our products? That trust factor is becoming just an absolute table stakes essential for successful brands. How do you position yourself in that universe of trust, so to speak?
Yeah, good question. So you mentioned earlier that there were 30 review platforms on Shopify. Those 30 might be the most popular, but I actually went in and counted, and there's 170.
Jeez. Okay.
So, yeah, but here's the thing. There's only 7 or 8 of those 130 that have the right partnerships to make those reviews actually count, other than just being on your website. So what we call that is being on an island, right? If you can collect all the best reviews in the world, but if they only ever live on your website, then nobody ever knows they exist until they actually get to your website and get to the page where those reviews are displayed. And like I mentioned earlier, when I first launched Shopper Approved, I knew I had to get the reviews out. I knew I had to get them to display in as many strategic locations as possible. And so I made that like my mission, to not only be able to collect reviews, but to be able to syndicate them to as many places as possible. And so the thing that differentiates us still today, and this has been our mantra for the past 15 years, is strategy, right? Because we bootstrapped. We didn't have, honestly, our main competitors have received hundreds of millions in venture capital, right? How do you compete with that? The only way you can do it is through guerrilla marketing and strategy. And so that's basically what we've done. We've just been, we've tried to collect as many ratings and reviews and feedback as possible, manage that, and then send it to as many strategic locations as possible to give our clients the best possible advantage that we can. So
And
that's what we do. That's the strategy. Honestly, that's it.
it's a pretty clear strategy, and it's pretty beneficial to the merchants that deploy your technology. And how do you think, for example, I've seen some pricing comparison websites, for example, sometimes they will display underneath a listing of a brand and their product and their price. Sometimes they'll list like a snippet or a specific review of that product from that brand. And I'm guessing that they have to provide some sort of XML feed, or they have to provide something to that shopping comparison website. They've got to provide that feed in such a way that that platform can interpret that and display that against the right product and against the right brand. And are these the types of partnerships you're referring to, where we have these out-of-the-box integrations with all of these partner websites, whether they be shopping comparison websites, whether they be marketplaces, whatever it might be, where we can then syndicate that out to in the moments that matter where that brand and that product is actually being considered for purchase.
Yeah, so there are feeds. Schema code helps a lot, especially in search. But then there's actual partnerships that like are signed partnerships with big companies. So we have a strategic partnership with Google, and that's for seller ratings and for product reviews. Then we have that's exact same partnership with Bing, and so we can get seller ratings and product reviews into Bing. And then we have an actual signed partnership with Walmart, so we can get product reviews into Walmart. So on top of that, so you got the feeds, you got the schema code, you got the actual written partnerships with the companies, and then you have the reputation management product that I was telling about earlier, where you actually send customers to different review platforms. And so those are actual assets, right? So that's getting those reviews out to as many places as you can. So you combine all of those different strategies together, and that's how you get as many reviews out as possible.
And how do you think about the new world of AI in the context of strategy and partnerships? Is it the kind of thing where you're like, hey, we need to do a deal with ChatGPT? We need to, because I'm assuming that by default, with your partnership with Google, that your reviews show up in Google Shopping listings, that they
Mm-hmm.
show up in Gemini responses. I'm guessing that they get referenced within Gemini responses where it's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate to do so. I think it sounds like you've got the Google juggernaut pretty well covered when it comes to these new kind of Q&A platforms where you're asking a question and it's giving you a direct answer and then it's referencing data found elsewhere on the internet. Does it feel like striking partnerships with some of these AI platforms is going to be a big priority for you guys moving forward to make sure they can index your content?
That is a great question, and I honestly haven't considered it.
Yeah.
So, wow, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to have to give that some thought because I think that there is an opportunity there. We just have to figure out how to figure out how to get those reviews into the questions that people ask because
Yeah.
there is a need for it for sure.
Yeah. I think the challenge with AI today, and look, I'm a premium subscriber to ChatGPT and a couple of others, but I think the trust issue with AI is potentially even bigger than the trust issue with the internet at large because
Mm,
AI still hallucinates. It still gives you answers that sound totally believable and totally plausible, but they can be completely ridiculous answers. And
yeah.
especially with kind of the woke approach that we've seen, particularly out of Google, where it presents something as the founding fathers, the picture of the founding fathers being black, for example. It's an interesting conundrum. I think most AI platforms are having issues with trust, just as we had issues with trust in the beginning of the internet, where you had no idea whether what you were reading online was complete crap or not. Unfortunately, AI is a case of garbage in, garbage out, and so the reality is that if they're training themselves on the sum total of the content on the internet, some of it's really good, some of it's really bad, and some of it's right down the middle. And it's like the stream of human consciousness. Some of it's really good, and some of it's really rubbish. And so I feel like platforms like yours, as a corpus of trusted data, of trusted information that's accurate, whether good or bad, it's accurate. I feel like those trusted corpuses of data are relatively limited today. Because
Yeah.
even when you look at Reddit, it's one of the most wild west areas left on the internet where it's wild, right? And some of it's really good and some of it's really bad. But man, you got to vet the stuff that you read on Reddit pretty hard, right? And they're making their data available for training AI data sets. And so I think that there is room for trusted partners such as yourself that are publishing the good, bad, and the ugly about a brand and about their products. I think
Yeah.
there's room for that to play an ever increasing part in making AI and AI's responses to us more trusted. And so that feels like a natural evolution for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Thanks for that insight, man.
No worries.
Now,
No worries.
now I got to get.
Sometimes it's hard to think of stuff when you're inside the fishbowl, right? And you've been doing the same thing the similar ways for 15 years. It's hard to get outside of that mindset, right?
Yeah, I've been thinking like, how do we implement AI into what we do? But I didn't really think about how do I get ratings and reviews into AI.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, how do you think about how how to meaningfully integrate AI into your technology? I'm assuming that something like being able to summarize, if you got 50 reviews about a product, being able to create an AI generated summary of those
Hmm.
50 reviews and condensing that down into a single summary of the reviews, or a sentiment, a general sentiment level of all 50 reviews or 500 reviews or whatever it is. It feels like that's a natural place where AI would make sense in your platform and would actually benefit the customer experience on the front end. So I don't have to read 50 reviews. I can read a summary of the 50 reviews at the top, and it's dynamically updated as a review is added. That feels natural to me. But where are there other areas where you see AI making sense within your technology suite?
Yeah, so that's is the easy fruit, right, to
Yeah.
pick, what
Yeah.
you just said, and we're implementing that right now. The next thing I think is being able to reply to reviews using AI, but not completely. I think having AI help you come up with a response, especially to a negative review, can be really helpful because a lot of times we get emotional and we want to,
Fight
what are you
back.
talking about? My product is awesome. But AI takes the emotion out of it, but it can add empathy back in. And then if you just read what they say and then you're like, okay, I agree with what AI wrote, and I'm going to add one or two comments of my own just to personalize it. That can get you 90% of the way to writing a really good response that's honest. And I call turning, whenever you can write a really good, empathetic response to a 1-star review, I call that a net positive. Because I'm sure you do it, I do it. When you go to buy something, you go and look at the 1-star ratings to see how bad is bad, right?
That's the first. That's the. I don't look at the top star ratings. I like the. I filter for the worst ratings
Mhm.
and the reviews.
Because you want to see how bad is bad. You want to see if it's a product problem or if it's like a shipping problem or a customer service problem.
Totally. Like I filter. I also, when it comes to Amazon, for example, the first thing I do is when I get a search results page is I filter for Prime products that get free shipping for
Oh
Prime because
yeah.
I'm a Prime member. That's the first filter I add. The second filter I add is 4-star or above rating. If it allowed me to go higher than 4 stars and say select 4.5 stars or above, I would do that. But it only allows you to filter for 4 stars and above. And
Uh,
basically, anybody that has an average of less than 4 stars, I don't want to know about that product because it tells me that there was a sufficient number of people that made a rating and a review on that product that were sufficiently unhappy to rate it below 4 stars that I don't want to go there. I don't want to be the guinea pig of that product to see if they fixed it, what caused those less than 4-star reviews. And so I feel like ability, if I'm within the category section of a D2C website, for example, if I'm in a category listing page and it's got 200 products in it, being able to filter by the star rating is actually really important to me. And
mhm.
it means that everyone else has already taken the pain and they've already figured out the wisdom of the crowd is coming into play, right? Now,
Right.
the challenge there is, I think, is that for products with no ratings or reviews yet, especially new drops, that becomes a challenge because it usually filters them out. Two, if a product only has one rating and review and you just have one single disgruntled customer and they leave a negative rating, that becomes a challenge.
Oh yeah.
And I think being able to set rules around how that filtering happens beyond just the pure star rating and saying, look, it needs to have at least 5 ratings against it. Otherwise, it doesn't qualify to be filtered in or out. We need to be able to set some reasonable boundaries on how, when we filter for that, it gets filtered. And I don't know that Amazon applies any additional rules over than the pure aggregate rating of a product, but it feels like you guys would be able to give that control into the brand's hands, at least on their own website, right?
Yeah, and we do. We let them set how many especially with product reviews, right? We let them set how many product reviews they want to collect before we publicly display it because like you said, maybe one or two people leave a bad review and then you're like, I'm screwed. I put all this money into this product and now I can't sell it because I have some bad reviews. The other thing we do is we will allow a company to display their seller rating score on a product review page temporarily. And we say in big letters, we're currently collecting product reviews for this product, but here's our overall seller rating score. So
Ah, okay.
it's like just like a stopgap
Hmm.
until they collect some product reviews for that particular thing. But at least the consumer can see that it's a good company,
Yes.
right? So there are some things that we do there. But I wanted to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, how you set prime and then you filter by 4 stars. But there's a third step that you probably do that you don't even realize. Once you get into that product, you probably go and look at the 1 stars.
Oh, I do. That's just
Yeah.
the pre-filtering. And then
Yeah,
once
exactly.
then I go into the actual ratings and reviews and I filter by 1 star and I look at those first.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And
an
you want to
interesting,
see how good if the company actually took care of those customers, right? It
totally.
makes all the difference in the world.
Well, and it's a red flag for me if those 1 star ratings and reviews, if they get no response from the brand, that's a little bit of a red flag for me, for sure. If they
Mhm.
respond, even if I don't necessarily like the response, even if I don't think the response is that impressive, just the fact that they responded indicates to me that if I have a problem with that product, they're probably going to be responsive if I contact them. And so
Mhm.
that whereas if there is zero response, if they've got 21 star reviews or 51 star reviews and not a single one of those gets responded to, that is a massive red flag for me because it means that if I
Yeah.
have a problem, I'm going to be yelling into a black hole and they're probably not going to do a damn thing about it. And that is scary as a consumer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
And
that's why it's
do you
important to
encourage your customers
respond.
to do that? Do you encourage your customers to do that? Say, look, you got to respond. Like these
Oh
negative
yeah.
reviews, you have to respond to these. It's very important.
Yeah, I don't know how many pages long it is, but I wrote this whole strategy guide on how to reply to 1 star reviews specifically because it's that
Wow.
important.
Yeah.
People don't realize just how important it is to write you should write a response to every single 1 star and it should take you some time. Like
Yes.
it shouldn't just be like
A copy paste.
yeah, it shouldn't be a copy paste. It should be like you address them, you show empathy, you actually try to resolve their problem and you talk about it. And because that gives you the opportunity, so many people are going to see that 1 star review and they're going to be like, wow, this company took care of that person. So I like you just said, I know they're going to take care of me. It's a reflection of who you are as a brand. Every time you reply to a 1 star, and they're worth 100 5 stars. Every single 1 star that you turn into a net positive by replying with a really good response, it's worth 105 stars.
To your point, I used to work in hospitality. That was my first career before I went into tech and digital. And I had a manager. I was working at Claim Jumper Restaurant at the time.
Okay.
And for anybody that knows Claim Jumper restaurants, they've gone the way of the dodo and they've gone bankrupt a couple of times. But back in the day, they were the restaurant to work at, and they had the best food, biggest portions, and the best service. And when I started work there, one of my floor managers said to me one day, because we were always encouraged to, the moment we detected any kind of a problem at the table at all, for whatever reason, we were encouraged to go to our floor manager and say, hey, look, this table's not happy for XYZ reason. Maybe you can go and talk to them. And this floor manager, I remember he said to me, he said, Jason, I love it when I have to go and talk to a table. I love it when I get to go and talk to a table that is unhappy. He said, don't ever be afraid to come and raise an issue with me. He goes, I love it. And here's why. He said, our customers that come into this restaurant, they come in and they have an expectation that everything's going to be perfect. And when it is, it's not memorable because they had that expectation and we simply met their expectation. So when they walk out the door, that experience is good, but it's not necessarily memorable. He said, however, when we fall short of those expectations, and then when we do an exceptional job of making that right to where we take a negative experience and turn it into a memorably positive experience by the way we dealt with their challenge, with their problem. We spilled food on them. We overcooked their steak. We took an hour to get the food to their table. Whatever it might be, we forgot to sing them their birthday song, whatever it is. He said, that is going to leave a much longer positive lasting impression with them, and they will become a more sticky customer than the customer that never has any issue and they come in and they get exactly what they expect. And so so he said service recovery is more important than good service to begin with, and how we do service recovery. And so I feel like that's very similar in the web environment. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. 100%. In fact, I think 1-star reviews are so important. I personally respond to every 1-star that Shopper Approved gets.
Wow.
I don't leave it to my team, and I have an amazing team. I don't leave it to them. I do it personally because it's that important to be able to really get into the mind of the consumer, understand why they're frustrated, and then help them. Right? Like, it's so important that I have that as a personal responsibility as the CEO and founder of the company. And I
You're
know a
eating
lot
your
of
own dog
companies might
food.
not be able to do that, but I feel it's that important. And so I do.
And you're eating your own dog food. You're actually doing, instead of
Yeah.
saying, do as I say, you're saying, do as I do, which is focus on the customer. Focus on the customers that are the most mad, because if you can make them happy, they're going to be your biggest advocates. It's that simple. If they're vocal enough to leave a 1-star rating and write a full-length multi-paragraph review, that shows commitment. And it's going to show commitment that if you can make it right, they're going to be probably your strongest brand advocates.
Yep, exactly.
I think it just requires empathy, and I think some brands lack it. And I think that's a real challenge out there today. When I'm dealing with some brands, because I'm a little bit abnormal in that I do the vast majority of my shopping online, right? It's not just because I work in the industry. It's because I just don't really enjoy the physical shopping experience very much. And so everything I can buy online, I do. It's probably like 80 to 90% of my shopping I do online. And so I am exposed to lots of different brand experiences as a result. And some are amazing and some are pretty crap. And when issues happen, some are very responsive and good at dealing with those issues, and some are crap. And so I think there's just still, and it shouldn't shock me, but it does. It shocks me that there's still wild variability in the service level of brands out there, and in their attention, their response times to emails, to messages, to live chats. Many still don't even have live chat. It blows my mind that there is still wild variability online around how merchants deal with their customers and treat their customers. And as someone who owned an e-commerce pure play, I owned an e-commerce pure play in the beginning, and I ran it for 7 years. So I know what it feels like. I'm not just a theorist, I'm a doist as well. I've run and built brands, I've run and built agencies, and now I've got my own consultancy. And so I've seen this world through lots of different lenses. But I would say just the through line is, the more empathy a brand has for their customers, the more successful they will typically be. Do you see the same thing?
100%. I think also along the lines of what you're talking about, a lot of companies don't have a reputation strategy. And so it's not their fault. They just don't know what to do.
Yes.
And I think that's something, how I talked about earlier, our strengths are guerrilla marketing and strategy. It's because we've had to figure out that side of it because we didn't have the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And there's a lot of strategy into trust. There's a lot of strategy and reputation. And I think that my team and I have cracked that code. And that's what makes Shopper Approved unique.
And I'll tell you what I used to do when we had our own e-commerce pure play. I had in my calendar on a Friday, I had a dedicated half an hour every Friday where I would put our domain name and our brand name into Google. And then I would see in forums, in message boards, in review websites, in shopping comparison websites, whatever, I would just see what the scuttlebutt out there was about our brand. And if somebody was in a thread, in a forum saying bad things, it took them 3 days to get us our stuff, or whatever the case may be, I would jump into those threads and I would respond. And I would say, hey, look, Jason here from flashcards.co.nz. Hey, sorry you had that problem. Reach out to me directly. Here's my email address. Reach out to me directly. We'll make it right. We have our warranty policy we literally named it the We'll Make It Right warranty policy. So
Love it.
instead of having a fixed thing where we say, unless you contact us within 30 days of receiving the product and tell us your problem, then you can't return it or whatever. We just said, we will do our level best to make it right by you in any way we can. That's our blanket policy. And so you'd be surprised. People oftentimes would jump in and they would go, oh my God, a brand actually responded to a complaint about their service in a public forum. Oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen this before. And it makes a difference, because then that stuff gets indexed by Google as well. And when people go and at least they see the response from the company and, hey, we care and we want to make this right, reach out to me directly. And here's our 0800 number. It's going to cost you nothing to call us and we'll make this right. And I think that brands that take those extra little steps and try to scale what is seemingly unscalable, that to me feels like a way for a brand to differentiate in an Amazon world.
Yeah. Well, ironically, out of all the top review platforms out there, we're the only ones that have our phone number on the homepage.
Wow.
So like it's crazy that how hard it is for people to get a hold of somebody these days, right? Like an actual real person on the phone. And if you have a phone number, you have to pay for it to get access to it. It's just crazy, man.
It's mad. It's mad. And in an AI world, in an AI chatbot world, it's only going to get worse. And I think the brands that continue to try to scale the unscalable are the ones that are going to win. The ones that differentiate through elite level customer service. That is a key differentiating factor, I think, of brands that are going to win. Now,
Amen,
as we
brother.
look forward, if we look out over the next 6, 12, 18 months, is there anything you don't do today that your customers are asking for that you say, hey, look, we don't do that, but in 6 months' time, we will be doing that? Or as you look across the market, is there anything out there that you say, hey, look, we don't see anybody doing this and we don't do this today, but we think this is important to have in our platform? What's the high priority stuff on your roadmap?
That's a great question. One of the top things is community. Going back to how do you differentiate in an AI world? We see the future being the ability to bring people together and to get in the mire and roll your sleeves up and work together to help build everyone up and help everyone be successful. And so our plan in 2025 is we're actually creating a mastermind community, and we're going to bring CEOs and executives together, and we're just going to all get in there and get dirty and see what we can do to help each other to be more successful.
That community is now more important than ever. And now, as I double down in the B2B e-commerce world, it's a big deal. And we're working on some things with the B2B EA, ecommerceassociation.org, to try to bring some more community mindedness to the B2B elements of e-commerce. I'm really excited to hear that's a focus of yours too. How do you guys make your money? So is it based on the module that the customer takes on? Is it based on the number of reviews and ratings you manage? Is it based on the channels you're syndicating to? You're a SaaS platform, so it's all the infrastructure is managed by you, and then you obviously integrate with the various different e-commerce platforms out there. But how do you guys charge, and what would I expect to pay if I was a brand and I wanted to use your platform?
So we base it on, a lot of companies base it on growth, like however many orders you get, that's how much we're going to charge you. What we typically do is we will figure out exactly what you need to be successful, and then we'll come up with a package that's catered specifically for you. And then once we lock you in at that level, even if your company grows, we don't charge you more. And so it's a fixed monthly rate, and it depends on the size of the company, but our starting rate is around $200 a month. And then it goes up from there depending on the size of the company. But when you think about the strategy behind what we do, it's not just cookie cutter tools. It's very different. We're very different than other review platforms because we roll up our sleeves and we really think about strategy and results and how to help a brand to become, we call it the reputation king in their space. In fact, we wrote a book called Reputation King.
Wow.
I don't
Nice.
know.
I like it. It's a physical
Right?
book.
Yeah. And we send it to them. And we created a course with the Cialdini Institute to help educate our clients on how to become the reputation king in their space. This is not cookie cutter. This is very strategic and specific to the brand. And I love it. I love everything we do. I love getting up and coming to work because I know we're doing good in the world and we're making a difference to our clients.
You've got the right surname for it. Brandley. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so important. Like, you couldn't have picked a better surname to be doing what you're doing. And if people want to get a hold of you and they want to talk to you about reputation management, they want to talk to you about authority, they want to talk to you about online trust, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well as the Shopper Approved website. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out to you and have a conversation about all this incredible stuff?
Yeah, so I think they're welcome to reach out to me. My personal email is scott@shopperapproved.com. Reach out to me directly. Let's talk. Also, you can get a free copy of our book, Reputation King, and you just go to reputationking.com/download. That bypasses all the opt-in forms, everything. I'm doing that for you, man, just for my appreciation for having you on your show. But there's no opt-ins, anything. You can go and read the book and see exactly what the strategies are that you need to have to take your business to the next level.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I know my audience will too. I'll drop the link into the show notes for that as well, where they can download that. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, an hour has absolutely flown by. I really appreciate you taking time to spend with me today and talk about online reputation management. It's been a really awesome conversation. Yeah. Now, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. So, Mr. Scott Brandley from Shopper Approved, what is your question for me today? I love putting guests on the spot because it's what comes off the top of their head. I love that.
All right. I love to read, and I'm always looking for an inspiring book that's going to help my business go to the next level. What is one of the most inspiring, motivating books that you've read in your career that has helped you to be successful?
Great question. Absolutely great question. I'll actually give you two. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, massive game changer book for me. It really, in this age of creeping socialism around the world, as a dyed-in-the-wool hardcore capitalist and all the positives and negatives that go along with that, I increasingly felt like I was a little bit in the wilderness on that. And her book really, coming from a communist background, coming from a communist country, and then moving to the United States and building her career there, I found that book to be super inspirational. And then there's a second book by Michael Gerber, and he's written a range of books. And my favorite by him is probably E-Myth Revisited. And
I love that book.
Yeah, awesome book. And it actually, after I read that book, it's interesting. It was so inspirational that after I read that book, I was still running my e-commerce pure play. This was the very beginning of my career. And I went back to the office after reading that book, and I wrote my operations manual, and I spent 3 days writing an end-to-end operations manual of every single function in the business, how it's done, why we do it that way, everything, to where if I got hit by a bus, the business could continue without me because someone could literally read that manual and they would know what they needed to do, every single thing, every single day, why we did it that way, the systems that we used to do it. And I tell you, to what that book taught me more than anything else was most business operators, they are just single employee businesses. They're an employee, but they're an employee of their business, right? Mm-hmm. And they never really build a business that is sustainable without them. And by operationalizing and structuring your business both to scale and as well as turning it into something that is potentially sellable as a business, even if you never sell, operationalizing things to where it could be sellable, you now all of a sudden free yourself from being the single linchpin in being able to run and grow and operate your business, and being able to free yourself from the grind of effectively being a single employee company. And I think he really hit a lot of nails on the head there. And so those two books probably there's other books too, but those two are probably the most transformational books I've read in relation to my professional life.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, listen, one of the things I remember in that book is he talks about the importance of customer service. And he talks about a gas station in Beaver, Utah, how he went to this gas station and it was like the best experience that he's ever had. And so every time I drove past Beaver, I would stop and I'd be like, what gas station is it? And I'd try different gas stations. And I went to, I'm pretty sure I know which one it is, but I went there. I was coming back from St. George maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And pulled up to the self-service gas pumps, and a guy came out. He cleaned my windshield, like old style, right?
Yep.
Checked my oil. I'm like, who are you? Like,
Who
never
does
happened,
this?
right? Like, it was amazing. So I think going back to customer service, trust, reputation, tying it all up, right? Like, it's really important.
It sure is. You've got a fan. I'm big kudos to what you're doing, what you're building, what you have built. I think increasing online trust is massively important. It's the rising tide that floats all boats. The more trustworthy individual businesses can be online, the more trust the general public has in our industry, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And the less trust that people have, the less business we will all do as a result. How we behave online doesn't just affect us. It affects everyone else in our industry at the same time. And I think we need to be very conscious and aware of that. I appreciate your positivity. I appreciate your take on the world, and I appreciate what you're building. So thank you for spending time with me today. I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.